Have the monsters of the Midway finally found their man? Well, Bears fans sure hope so, with a decades-long parade of quarterbacks and no Super Bowl title since Jim McMahon in 1985. Caleb Williams has been anointed as Chicago's best chance to return to greatness for a franchise starved of postseason relevancy. Well, Williams' welcome to the NFL moment comes at home at Soldier Field, hosting the Titans. But week 2, circle that on your calendar. 2 first-round quarterbacks going head-to-head as Williams hits the road for the first time to take on C.J. Stroud and the Texans in prime time for Sunday Night Football. Maybe week 11 through 16, a gauntlet of divisional matches sandwiched between a meeting with the 49ers. Something interesting to look at is Caleb Williams make his NFL debut. Back here with the 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden, and looking at the schedule for the Chicago Bears, are there any concerns looking at their schedule? And also, just how rookie-friendly do you think this might be for Caleb Williams making his introduction to the NFL?
Well, I think the concerns for me, it happens in the second half of the season when you talk about playing against the Vikings, the Lions, the 49ers, the Vikings, and the Lions in Seattle, in Green Bay. I mean, look at how they finished the season from week 11 to week 18. Good luck, because you're playing against divisional foes and playoff caliber teams. But by that time, you kind of know exactly who your quarterback is in Caleb Williams. You know, you got a great understanding in who your team is in totality. So you got to be ready to rock and roll. But as I stated earlier, Week 1 is a great game for Chicago because that's a winnable game. I love the additions the Tennessee Titans have made around Will Levis, Calvin Ridley, bringing D-Hop back, you know, Tony Pollard. They made some additions on the defensive side. But if you're Chicago, you got to like your opportunity in that ball game, because Tennessee was a inconsistent team a year ago, and they still have a young quarterback as well. And for your rookie quarterback, Kiana, his first game is at home. So he has the great home environment at his disposal instead of trying to get a win on the road, being your first game in that type of environment. So for Chicago, this is a great place to be in. It's very, very unique when you look at how the schedule was orchestrated. But by the time you get into that gauntlet between week 11 and week 17, you kind of know who you are as a ball club.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think about how Chicago finished that season last year. They were kind of on a roll and could have, I mean, it was a little bit of a long shot, but had an opportunity to make the postseason, hopefully trying to keep that going. But I want to move on to America's team. Are they really America's team still?
Yeah, so they say.
Okay, all right, we're going to move on from that. It's been 29 years since they last won an NFC championship game, looking to get that monkey off their back. This year, Dak's final year under contract, 3 road trips in their first 5 games. On paper, the end of the season looks a little lighter for the Cowboys,
no
but
question. Looking
at this schedule, does anything jump out to you about America's quote-unquote team?
You know what, for the very first time, we don't see week 1 against the Giants for the Cowboys, right? But they got to go to Cleveland, a very, very intriguing team. Outside of that, you have the Saints, the Ravens, and you get the Giants Thursday night, followed by the Steelers on Sunday night. So this is a unique situation for Dallas, because the concerns it hasn't been regular season production. The season for the Dallas Cowboys don't start until postseason play. We believe they have what it takes to get into that postseason type of environment, but a lot can transpire between now and playoff football. But for the Dallas Cowboys, I love this week 1 matchup because they travel to Cleveland, playing against one of the defenses that were one of the best in the National Football League last year, and your quarterback gets an opportunity to really show, I still got it. You know what I mean? Because this is a prove-me year for Dak Prescott. This is a prove-me year for Coach McCarthy as well, because it's safe to say those 2 guys are tied to the hip if things does not work out in regards to the win-loss record. But you're playing against a team in the Cleveland Browns with Deshaun Watson. I think their team could be one of the most talented teams in the AFC when you look at what the Cleveland Browns have. So that's a very, very intriguing game for Dallas week 1 compared to what we've seen in years past when they played against the New York Giants in a divisional foe. Even though it was a divisional foe, the Dallas was clearly by far the more talented team on the football field when they faced off against the Giants week 1. This is a different animal this year at week 1 playing against the Cleveland Browns.
A lot on the line for Dallas, as B-Mac mentioned. All right, I'm not sure if there was a bigger letdown in the NFC than the Eagles, who were the team to beat until like about week 13, and then everything went downhill from there. But they're opening up the season in Brazil against the Packers, early week 5 by 10.5 wins. same as the Cowboys. Is this schedule built for Philly to get back to the top of the NFC East?
Yeah, no question, Kiana, because I think Jalen Hurts will have a bounce-back year compared to similar to what he did his Super Bowl run with the Eagles when they made it to the Super Bowl. They added Saquon Barkley, one of the more talented running backs in the National Football League. They've added some studs on the defensive side. I love what they did in the draft. You know, Quayon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean. So this is a team, personnel-wise, I like what they've done. They got to be more stout at the point of attack, especially on the defensive side. You know, they paid their 2 wide receivers and AJ and Smitty. So, yeah, I love the Eagles being able to showcase their ability to get back to the top of the NFC East. Week 1 is Green Bay. Will they be loved? Will they be loved by Jordan Love? If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, you don't want any love from Jordan Love. No. You want to dish out heartache and pain, because if he's showing love, that means he's doing some pretty good things against your defense. So this is a great test for the Eagles defensively, week 1, playing against Jordan Love and those outstanding pass catchers that he has at disposal of throwing the football to, along with the running game, with now Jacobs being a part of their team offensively. So Eagles, Philly, you're going to get a chance to see exactly what your defense is made of, especially in the secondary, because that was kind of the Achilles heel of their defense a year ago, and having inconsistent performances against opposing offenses, passing attack out the gate. Cross seas in Brazil, Friday Night Football. Varsity will be playing. It ain't the JV, it's the varsity when the Eagles face off against Green Bay. And let's see exactly what Philly's defense can do in the secondary against Jordan Love.
Yeah, you talked about that new face in a new place. Well, I want to stick with the NFC East and zero in on the Giants. They open their season at home. They have 3 primetime games, a trip to Germany on the schedule, another Thanksgiving matchup on the road, and they'll have their first look at that guy you talked about, Saquon Barkley, in a different uniform. That's week 7 at home. They had 6 wins last year. Do we think they can surpass that this time around with what lies ahead?
I'll tell you this much, Kiana, if you ask me this question after week 2, I promise you I have an answer for you. A confirmed answer. I don't know, but the reason why I feel like after week 2, I'll know exactly what this team could do, because look at the teams. Minnesota, Washington, 2 teams that will have new quarterbacks. One team for sure will have a rookie quarterback, quote-unquote, starting as we see it today. The other team have potentially a rookie or a journeyman in Sam Darnold as the starting quarterback. Yeah. So if you're the New York Giants under Brian Daboll, who I believe is a real good coach in the National Football League, if your quarterback is healthy, you got to win these ball games. Yeah. You cannot start this season off 0-2 for sure. I mean, if you start off 1-1, I think it's safe to say the Giants fan base, they have the lighter fluid ready, but it ain't lit. It ain't lit. But if you start off 0-2 against Washington in Minnesota, they're lighting that house on fire. Deserving so, because you got to find a way to win the ball game. You have the more experienced quarterback in regards to starts as of late on your team, playing against offenses that are trying to figure things out with new quarterbacks. That's very, very important. And one team has an entire new regime when it comes to coaching in the Washington Commanders, along with a potential rookie starting at quarterback for them. So that is an opportunity for the New York Giants and their fan base. Listen, they got the lighter fluid ready with the lighter, but they ain't lit it just yet. If you start off 0-2, light the house on fire, get ready, because it's time to burn it all down.
Things can get ugly. Giants fans, cover your eyes, keep the lighter fluid, the lighters, keep it all away, at least until week 2 or 3 is what B-Mac's saying. All right. I want to wrap up this discussion. Obviously, I want to talk about my boys in the Bay Area. 11.5 wins Vegas has them at. They had the best record of the NFC last year. B-Mac, this is how we're going to do this one. I want you to tell me why I should feel real good about this schedule, and then also tell me why I should be a little bit concerned.
Well, you should feel good about this schedule, because I think it's safe to say at least 90% of the teams you're going to play against, Kiana, you have more talent.
Okay. Okay.
That's the first thing.
All right.
Secondly,
I feel
why
good about
you should be a little concerned about this schedule, is there any Super Bowl hangover? I don't drink, so I don't know how it feels to be hungover. But
I can tell you, it's not
good. Exactly, have endured bad hangovers. And when you're hungover, I don't know personally, but I've seen, and Kiana just informed all of us, she's been hungover before, you don't feel good.
No.
You don't feel good, because what happens when you're hungover, you think about what led to you being hungover. Why did I do that? Will they have any Super Bowl-like hangover moments in regards to, dang, we allowed one to slip through our fingers and not focus on the here and now? Because the teams they're going to face off against can care less about what they did not do in Las Vegas. It's about finding a way to beat a team that made it to a place that we would like to go, which is the Super Bowl. So those are my areas of concern for your San Francisco. But like I said, to start off, the benefit that you have is this is one of the more talented teams in the National Football League as we see it today based on their personnel.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of coming off that first Super Bowl loss against the Chiefs back in that 2019-2020 season, came out of the gate, and you talk about that Super Bowl hangover. It wasn't pretty for that team opening up that season. So hopefully looking to turn things around out there in the Bay Area. B-Max sounding like my mom. Why do you keep drinking if it makes you feel like that?
You know, I was so dumb. Why did I do that?
All right, you know, that's why I stick with the light stuff now. All right. Taking a look at the odds to win the NFC. My defending NFC champs with the shortest odds at plus 250. They're followed by the Lions, who won their first playoff game in 32 years. They have the second best odds in the conference at plus 600. Vegas not writing off the Eagles following that massive collapse last season. Also, BMAX spoke highly of them. They're plus 650 to take the NFC along with the Cowboys. And Jordan Love and the Packers round out the top 5 shortest odds at plus 850. We dive more into what lies ahead in the NFL for the 2024 season. We examine the top revenge games to watch for. That's coming up next on CBS Sports HQ. Reunions, revenge games, rematches, oh my. The 2024 schedule was officially revealed Wednesday night with storylines aplenty, including a rematch in Week 7 of Super Bowl 58 between the San Francisco 49ers and the Kansas City Chiefs, with Kansas City earning their 4th Super Bowl title in franchise history in a 28-25 overtime victory over San Francisco, and the 3rd title in the Mahomes era. Kansas City looking to make it 3 straight and cement themselves into some rare air. And it all begins for the defending champs with the first game of the season opening night at Arrowhead Stadium in the AFC title game rematch, hosting the Baltimore Ravens. They follow up with the 5th installment of another chapter of the epic rivalry between Joe Burrow and Mahomes as the Chiefs host the Bengals. And speaking of epic rivalries, the Chiefs and Bills will face off for their 5th straight year in the regular season, with the Bills winning 3 of the previous 4 matchups, this one taking place in Week 11. A lot of action going on for Kansas City as they eye their quest for their 3rd straight title. We now bring back CBS Sports NFL analyst and 2-time Super Bowl champ Bryant McFadden as we dive into the reigning champ's path to a repeat title. And when you look at the Chiefs' schedule, there's a couple of tough games to open the year. There's a bye before their meeting with San Francisco. Vegas has them set at 11.5 wins on the season, with matchups against Baltimore, Buffalo, Houston, and San Francisco. I'm going to throw in Pittsburgh for you in that one as well. But does this look like a 12-plus win season for Kansas City?
You know, barring good health, yes. And the reason why I say that is because under Andy Reid, you know, that has kind of been the standard for him, you know, coaching in Kansas City with Pat Mahomes as his quarterback, you know, at least 12 ball games. You know, it has kind of been the standard, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. Even though they're the reigning Super Bowl champs, they will be getting every opposing team's best effort. It doesn't matter. They're going to squash them, just as you see there on your graphic, like they've done year after year. So I factor that into the equation, and I love how they start this season because, yes, they're playing against Baltimore. They're playing against Cincinnati, 2, you know, playoff caliber teams. But, Kiana, they get them at home. And then they get Baltimore, the very first game of the season. Recent history has shown all of us in those matchups, the defending champs, they're 13-5. So they have won, the champions have won that game more so than losing that ball game, even with Kansas City losing last year. But they didn't have 2 key components in regards to Travis Kelce and Chris Jones. And then after that, you get Cincinnati with extra rest because you play Thursday night. So you get extra rest to play against Cincinnati, and you get Cincinnati right there in the crib, at the crib again. So you're talking about playing those 2 ball clubs back to back. I would rather have them in the scenario they currently have them in because you get extra rest and you get them in your backyard.
Yeah, and you talk about that game last year against the Lions, even though they were without two of their best players, talking about Travis Kelce and Chris Jones on the defensive side of the ball. Still a very close game, narrow loss in that one. But I want to stick with the AFC West. Now, outside of the Chiefs, perhaps there's a lot of question marks surrounding the other three teams, including a now Jim Harbaugh-led Chargers team who looks to kind of change that outlook on the Bolts. Hopefully there's no more charging, as they call it, right? But they have the 5th easiest strength of schedule. The Chargers won 5 games last year. They lost a lot of talent on offense, and my eyes zero in on Keenan Allen. Vegas has them at 8.5 wins. So my question to you, B-Mac, how much of an impact do you think Harbaugh will have on the Chargers' immediate success this season?
I mean, if you go back to his time in San Francisco, he didn't make the fans wait. They saw a nice return on their investment. Yeah. You know, clearly when he became the head coach in San Francisco, that led to Super Bowl opportunities. I'm not saying that's the case for the Chargers because there's a lot of rebuilding that needs to happen, but I think he's establishing his mindset within this ball club. We're going to set the game within the trenches on either side of the football field, right? We got a quarterback in place. Yes, we lost some key contributors when it comes to the pass catching position, but we got guys that we believe we can lean on, and we're going to run the football. Now, when you look at their schedule, if we can get it back on the graphic again, by the time they play against Kansas City, I think that Kansas City game is the 5th game on their schedule, right? The 4th game. We're going to have a great indication on who the Chargers will be. Yeah. They got the Raiders. That's a winnable ball game. Yeah. You got Carolina. That's a winnable ball game.
I agree.
When it comes to Pittsburgh, you know, it's not as winnable as the first 2. Okay. But who knows? But you have to travel to Pittsburgh. So if you take care of your business to a degree, or if you go out in that 3-game stretch, you're 2-1, you play Kansas City in a great spot, and then you have the bye right after that, and then after that you got Denver, Arizona, Saints. Yeah. 3 winnable ball games after your bye game. So this is a great way. If I'm the Chargers, this is how I want to start the season off, Kiana, playing against two teams that we feel we can win. We can beat those ball games. And the one luxury they have on their side, when you factor in the first 2 ball games, heck, even the 3rd ball game, they have a better quarterback than those 3 opponents. Yeah, no, that's based on what we've seen. Right? Yeah. So that's a key component as well. Yeah, and like you said, Harbaugh came into San Francisco. It wasn't more so wait. It was let's get to the wins now. Certainly a positive thing for the Chargers as they look to turn their narrative around. But we also didn't talk about Week 12. That's a brother against brother matchup from one Harbaugh to another. John Harbaugh and co. opening up the season against the defending champs. Now, Week 3 through 6 games, those are games against Dallas, against Buffalo, against Cincinnati. They've got a Christmas Day game against C.J. Stroud and the Texans. If you recall, Baltimore had the best record in the league last year, just 4 losses on the season, but B-Mac, they lost a lot of talent on the defensive side of the ball this offseason. Do you think that they can maybe replicate that success this year, or do you think they'll have maybe a taller hill to climb? Well, I think they can repeat some of the success because you still got Lamar Jackson. You added Derrick Henry. This is an unbelievable running team without Derrick Henry. You bring Derrick Henry into the fold, look out. Now, what will this defense look like without Mike McDonald, who became the head coach for the Seattle Seahawks? If you go back to a year ago, they did 2 things extremely well: sacking the quarterbacks and creating turnovers. Can they keep that same mindset defensively, because their team really benefited from those elements from the defensive side? So those are my concerns with their team. But when you have Lamar Jackson, you have more than a fighting chance. Now, could we put their schedule back up on the graphic real quick? Because they have a very, very tricky schedule when you look at the first game and then what follows after the first game against Kansas City. You got Kansas City, and then you get the Raiders, right? But then you get Dallas, you get Buffalo, you get Cincy. That's a very, very difficult 3-game stretch, and you travel in 2 of those 3 games to Dallas and to Cincinnati. So when you factor in how they start the season off, and before they get to that Washington Commander game, which is Week 6, those are 3 very, very important ball games, because you're playing against 2 AFC foes, and 1 is in your division in the Cincinnati Bengals. So by the time we get to Week 6, we got a great indicator on what type of team this Raven team is and will be moving forward.
I feel like we can learn a lot about these teams just the first few weeks of the season, but we cannot talk about the AFC without talking about your boys.
Here we go, Steelers.
The Steelers, they gutted their quarterback room,
yes,
added Pro Bowl linebacker Patrick Queen, had an underrated offseason, and you know what? I'm not even going to really set you up for this one. I just want you to just give me your impressions. What do you like? What don't you like? Concerns? Prime time? Lay it on us. What do you like?
We know the Steelers have one of the tougher schedules, heck, just in the division alone, right? I love how they started the season. Now, that Atlanta game is kind of tricky. We don't know. Kirk Cousins, Raheem Morris, nice talent there. We don't know what to expect.
Right.
But if you take care of business against Atlanta, you got to like your chances against Denver. You got to like your chances against the Chargers. You got to like your chances against the Colts. Yeah. Right? Three teams that are trying to figure things out, all with, you know, Justin Herbert's not a young quarterback, but Denver, young quarterback, and potentially Bo Nix. And, of course, Richardson returns to the Colts. And then you got Dallas, you got the Raiders. So I love how they start the schedule off. I'm more concerned about week 1 than I am about week 2, week 3, and week 4, because that is a team that could be a very tricky team in the Atlanta Falcons. And I know one thing about the schedule. When I played, we always wanted to start off 1-0. Yeah. We want to get that first victory out of the way right now. You don't want to wait. And as fans, you don't want to wait either. You know, you're a 49er fan. Think about the years when you guys used to start off 0-1. Oh, yeah, that was It's like now, when are we going to get our first victory? Right? So for players, week 1 is super important because you don't want to start off 0-1. Now you've put all of your attention in week 2 because you don't want to start off, what, 0-2. Right? And that is the slump or the conundrum that some teams get involved in. And the same can be said for fan bases. So for Pittsburgh, week 1 is a very tricky game because if they can take care of their business week 1, I love the next 3 ball games being in their favor based on the opponents they will be seeing. All right.
Let's wrap up our AFC chat with one of the teams with the biggest expectations last year, but I feel like it may have been one of the biggest letdowns. The Jets, they won 7 games last year without Aaron Rodgers. 9.5 wins set for them, beginning with the Niners, Titans, Patriots, Broncos, and Vikings. Do you think that's achievable this time around, looking at how their schedule flows? Perhaps, I mean, looking at this schedule, maybe could they start 5-1, throwing it out there?
Under the assumption of a few things. Number 1, health, being healthy. Aaron Rodgers, don't lose any offensive linemen. That's one thing about the Jets. Injuries happen every year to key components on the offensive line, and their defense still staying afloat. But look at their schedule, guys. Yes, you got to go out to San Francisco. I think they're a 6.5-point underdog right now. But then you got Tennessee. You got the Patriots. You got the Broncos. You got the Vikings abroad in London. And then you get the Bills Monday night. That stretch between week 2 and week 5 are winnable ball games with Aaron Rodgers. Winnable ball games. If you're a Jets fan, of course, you got to travel out to San Francisco, your 49ers, championship caliber team. But outside of that, week 2 and week 5 are all winnable ball games. So if you're telling me by the time you get to the Bills in week 6, if you're a Jets fan and you're 5-1, getting ready to play against a divisional foe in the Buffalo Bills, you're taking that and you're running with it because that's a great way to start the season off.
I feel like 5-1 is achievable looking at that schedule that we just saw. So maybe possibly good things coming for Jets fans. B-Mac, if somebody knows the AFC, it's this guy right here. Appreciate the insight. Thanks so much. So let's take a look at the odds to win the AFC. Defending champs, obviously, with the shortest odds to win the conference. They're followed by Lamar Jackson and the Ravens at plus 490. Joe Burrow and the Bengals, who actually missed the postseason last year with the third shortest odds at plus 700, along with the Bills. And this Texans team, who can be very scary, B-Mac. I think they're the team to look out for.
Thanks.
Should all their pieces come together the way they anticipate, rounding out the top 5 best odds at plus 850 to win the AFC. Lions, Giants, Bears, oh my. We head to the NFC to break down the upcoming 2024 schedule, and our 2-time Super Bowl champ returns to tell us how much of an impact Caleb Williams could really have on the Bears' win total. That's coming your way next on CBS Sports HQ.